Contend, Lord, with those who contend against me. Fight with those who fight against me. This is the plea of David as he begins Psalm 35. And it's one of struggle against an opponent that is in his life, maybe many opponents, and he's crying out for God to come to his rescue, to fight, to contend, to strive, to work. And reading that, it got me thinking about the way that God is with us, and the way that he fights for us in all situations. On Monday, I was talking with the trainees, with Kelly and Natalie, about what we wanted to talk about for our last high school gathering of the summer. And Kelly thought that it would be good to talk about God is always with us and what that means. And in the midst of that conversation, as we were talking about it, we were talking about this image of a pit, this being low and down and hurting, and then a peak. That we have moments in our lives where we're in a pit, where things are hard, where things are difficult, where we don't understand, where we can't see, we don't see a way out, and we're crying out for help. And then we have moments where we're at the peak, where everything is good and God is faithful and we feel close to him and we're near and there's joy in our hearts. But then a lot of life is just in between those two points, the pit and the peak. And we started talking about some of the scriptures, the stories in the Bible, and asking the question, when Joseph was literally in a pit, did he feel God's presence? Was God with him there? We know that later he is at the peak, he's second in command, and he sees all that God has done, that what was intended for evil, that God brought about for good. But when he was in the pit, was God with him? Did he feel that? Did he know that then? The moment before Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were tossed into the fiery furnace, was God with them? We know the answer is yes, of course. They're thrown in, and there's actually an angel. There's 4 men in the fire now, and God is with them. But in those moments, do we trust? Do we believe? Can we actually feel God's presence? Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane. He's at the threshold, essentially, of looking into what is in store for him. Some authors and speakers describe it as he's staring into the mouth of hell at that point. And it's actually that moment when he wins the battle of the cross, because he's already made up his mind. He goes through that moment, that excruciating ordeal where he's sweating drops of blood because he makes up his mind there. But in that moment, he's in a pit. And is God with him? And we see Scripture tells us that yes, angels come and attend to him. We have all these moments in life. And oftentimes when we're in the pit, when we're striving, when it's hard to see, when we're crying out for justice, it's hard to trust that God is, in fact, with us. But I want us to take comfort in this. In the midst of that, we can look up to the peak. Not for what God is going to do, but for how he wants to and comes alongside and lifts us out of it. Not out of our circumstances necessarily, but he lifts our heart, he lifts our hope, and he lifts our eyes to see beyond the pit, to see beyond the wall that we cannot scale, to see beyond that obstacle, that there's no other way that we could strive hard enough or work hard enough to get ourselves out of. Maybe you have been in a pit defined by betrayal, like Joseph, and you need reconciliation. Maybe you are in a pit like Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego because you hold fast to your convictions when everyone else around you won't. Maybe you're in a pit because you're facing temptation, and it's a struggle, and you're not sure if you can be victorious. I want you to know that God is with us in those moments. He's with us in between. He's with us as he lifts us up to the peak. that he contends for us. He fights for us. And when we trust that, when we can look up to the peak, we can know that he's faithful to us. And when we're at the peak and we're actually there and everything's good and we feel close to God, we can look back into the pit and go, God was faithful and he was present with me there. And we can know that he's with us through the whole journey. And maybe we can end our days the same way that David ends this psalm, with just praise. Praise for who God is. May that be what you hold on to. That God is faithful and with you, contending and fighting for you against the things that would stand in your way. And may his praise always be on your lips.